Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the RENNSPORT community events here today with a special car at a very famous track, because today we will have the Porsche Mission R on track at Spa-Francorchamps, of course one of the most iconic tracks in the world. And I'm not alone here today, because alongside me as usual is Tim Ireland. Welcome Tim.
Hello Lino, and hi everyone on Twitch. How are you guys today? Yeah, we've got a bit of a funny one for, I suppose, for us at the here on the RENNSPORT Switch channel. We don't normally race the Mission R a lot, but it's time for you guys to try out something a little bit new and hopefully interesting.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the Mission R is really a car of its own. So let's jump right into the live feed here from qualifying. And yeah, 4-wheel drive, full electric car with a lot of power, especially here in qualifying, because this car has two racing modes, one for qualifying with more power and one that's a bit more tame for the race. So you will probably see two very, very different performances here today.
Yeah, it does have a quali mode, which is definitely something we don't see very often here in RENNSPORT. The hypercars have quali mode as well, but and it is quite a bit more aggressive, so it'd be a bit of a challenge for these guys to get used to quali mode and then get back to race mode. You can see it bouncing around a lot on track there.
Yeah, the quali mode really being hard to tame. I don't think we will see that many issues in the race because the car is a lot more tame. But yeah, I mean, if you want to try it out yourself on the leaderboards, you can do that until Wednesday for free. See how well you get along with it. There's actually a time trial or feature time trial on the Discord, which runs until Wednesday at this very track. So there should be some decent competition. And I'm sure if you can manage to get a good lap time in quali mode, that this feels very, very rewarding.
Yeah, it is a bit of an electric rocket in quali mode, that's for sure. It's a rapid piece of machinery. 4-wheel drive, like you said before, so not, again, another difference. I think it's the only 4-wheel drive car we have in RENNSPORT. So something new to master for the drivers, on top of it being just a big electric motor.
Yeah, and we've seen Ron and Hood really using that power and that all-wheel drive out of Stavelo. Almost going out there sideways. This first lap will be just a bit of an installation lap for everybody. I think Ron and Hood, one of the big favorites in this race. So let's take a look at what his first real flying lap will be. Coming out of La Source, you have this long downhill section, and Eau Rouge, I don't think we have many cars that make Eau Rouge this difficult with that much power. You can see a lot of braking into this section. And then upwards of 300 kilometers per hour down the Camel Straight. You have to really let the car flow through the turns. You see it's shaking a lot, it's very soft. We have open setups for this race. So a lot of guys, I think, are using the setup from one of our colleagues here at RENNSPORT, Mark Onyemachi, who uploaded a fairly good one, but I don't think it's optimized for quali mode. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I think he's concentrated mainly on the normal mode, not so much quali mode, which is a big difference. So it's going to be a bit to see who can adapt the quickest and manage to carry some pace. As you were saying, Rowan seemed to be dealing fairly well with the Mission R around here right now.
Yeah, qualifying of course will be important because of the fact that we will have two races here today. One of them, or both of them, having the grid set by this qualifying session. So if you have a bad first race, can still try to make up for it in the second one. I just want to clip the grass a bit, which I didn't really like, but he's on a good track here for lap 2. Dennis Kurzer already parked his car, so maybe picked up a bit too much damage to carry on. But we've seen that Dennis Kurzer has not a big issue starting from the back, right?
Yeah, he seems to be, I wouldn't say happy with it, but at least comfortable with it. He knows what to do to work his way to the front as the race progresses.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think we will particularly see many cars with competitive times here in quali. It is very tricky in quali mode. In the race, I think the first few laps in the first race will be a bit more getting used to the lower power and the different behaviors of the car. But pretty much anybody's game, especially coming into a Rouge, should be a lot easier. And Rico Bräuninger, we see some damage to the front of the car, which he picked up in the out lap. But he seems to be on a semi-good run, which could at least help him to get onto the front row. Which it does. He is not going for another one, so you have one valid lap to put it in. Fenton, I think he's one of the newer NGS RT drivers, if I've seen that correct. Already got some support in chat from, of course, the team leader, Radoslav Pironkiewicz, who, while not here today, is a usual contender in the races. But yeah, that is pretty much our grid set for the race. Ronan Hood and Enrico Bräuninger, two very old mates on the front row.
Yeah, I think, like you said before, this race is going to be far more on adapting the race pace, especially race 1 here. Like Bino said before, there are 2 races today. I think race 1 could be people figuring it out and getting their eye in with the car, and then maybe have a bit more consistency in race 2.
Indeed. I think what makes this really interesting is that the first race we usually tend to see the grid stretch out a bit more, and the second one most of them are in their grooves. But we can see the red lights are on. Somebody already rolling in the background. And we go racing in Spa-Francorchamps. It's a not so good side. I think that was Dennis Kurzer and Roland Den Hood leading into turn 1. Enrico Bräuninger around the outside of him. And we have a car spinning off in the background. Not sure what that was, the 11 car of Baranek.
He seems to have dropped pretty far behind, so I'm assuming it was him. Just seemed to lose it a little bit on the exit.
Dennis Kurzer in trouble. Seems to have hit the wall, exiting Rouge. And Roland Den Hood having a dream start to race 1.
Yeah, he's got a good gap there, and we know Rowan's pretty consistent when he gets going, so he should have a fairly good chance of it from here. But I think Enrico's going to be pushing him pretty hard.
And indeed, this is open setup. So I think, as we said in the qualifying stages, the setup these guys use, which are derived from Mark Onimachi, is a lot more catering to this car in race mode, which is right now where you can also see it being a lot more calm to drive. Klaus Kohn trying to get an attack going on Marczynski, who yesterday in the RNL race had to retire from the race due to some family business, to say it like that. But today may have a chance at a podium.
Yeah, he's definitely off to a good start there. He's got Klaus Kernan behind him, just about a second or so gap. But he's a little bit behind Enrico Bräuninger, but he seems to be doing pretty well, keeping the gap.
And then we're just having a major drift out of Blanchimont. It's not what you want. Does take a toll on the tires as well. So for now, I think all fine. But in the long run, you really need to cut down on those mistakes, I think.
Yeah, it won't matter so much today with it being short sprint races. They can kind of abuse the tires a little bit more than they generally would, which in a car like this may be a bit safe. Not that the car's safe, but yes, you can safely abuse the tires a little bit more.
Indeed. And of course, the two races also have slightly different lengths. So in the first race, you can really push the car. 15-minute race. I don't think there should be too much of an issue with tires in the long run. But in the second race, which is 10 minutes longer, I think then it will be a bit more punishing if you do mistakes like that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to have more of an effect. The tires get worn up pretty quickly when they're hot, and they heat up pretty quickly once you start sliding around. So it can be a bit of a vicious cycle.
But Ronan Hood really in control of this race. 3.2 seconds in front of Enrico Bräuninger. Of course, yesterday not so happy with how the race went, but today maybe he can salvage a bit of this weekend for himself.
Yeah, he's got a pretty clean start to the race. So he should be able to control it from here. Without pushing too much, he should be able to keep his tires pretty fresh.
Car's definitely staying a lot flatter to the ground compared to quali mode. Of course, electric cars, you have this, what people call instant torque, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. So whatever you do with the pedal, there's no delay to the delivery to the wheels. And while of course a very, very neat feature, because the car is as responsive as it can get, on the other hand, it can overload the car in a very short moment, which you won't really get with the internal combustion engine, with a classic internal combustion engine. But yeah,
a few of the other drivers finding it a bit tricky to drive. The numbers seem to have dropped a little bit, but we've got our pretty kind of die-hard 6 there carrying on, trying to tame the electric beast.
one and hit on the grass and somehow doesn't spin. Just ran too right, slightly into the gravel, which really catches you out with this car. But
that was an impressive save.
Indeed, it was. Brought Enrico Bräuninger a tiny bit closer. Who is really taking it very safe, I think. But you can hear him getting on the throttle, off the throttle, just trying to get the car to turn in, which is a bit tricky with this car at times.
Yeah, all-wheel drive. A bit definitely a unique thing about this car that not all the drivers will be used to. That's for sure. There has been a little bit of practice put in by some of the guys here, but I don't think they've put like an extensive amount into it. Like you say, a bunch of the drivers using Marco Amachi's setup, which he kindly provided to us for the race. You can find that on the setups channel on the forum, on our Discord, sorry.
Indeed. And I mean, not only the all-wheel drive system, but due to being an electric car, this car is bound to be a bit heavier than most other racing cars. At 1.5 tons, that is quite some weight to carry around through those corners. I think a typical GT3 you will find at around 1.35 tons with a very different weight distribution. Oh, and again, just slightly sideways over the crest. So Ronan Hood really not backing down.
No, he seems to be carrying on pushing. Enrico Breininger's not letting him have it all his own way. He is definitely pushing him right now. The gap keeps fluctuating a little bit. If Rowan keeps making these mistakes, then it might come down pretty quickly.
Yeah, all it takes is one mistake, which in this car, fairly easy to make, but he's already halfway through the first race, which I think will be a bit of a motivation boost. Klaus Kohn had to let go of Mashinsky as well, so Mashinsky, although he's running a bit wide here, is in a pretty good position for this first race.
Yeah, he's got a bit of a gap behind him, so he's got a little bit of breathing room to make some mistakes, which is probably they're all a bit thankful for in this car. Enrico Breininger must have had a bit of a moment because he's dropped way back from Rowan now.
Yeah, and is only 6 seconds in front of Mashinsky. Seems like there's no damage to the car, even though he just had a bit of a catching moment as well, leaving campus. But yeah, probably just a spin in Puhon. Not ideal, but also not world-ending. Gives Ronan Hood some more breathing room, though.
We've seen Rowan driving quite a bit here on the RENNSPORT Switch channel, and if there's one thing we kind of all know about him, though, is that he won't let up. He's not a driver that takes it easy.
Oh, Mashinsky with a huge crash in Blanchimont.
That is an X Mission R. There's a lot of bodywork missing on that car.
And I think even worse for him, maybe he's able to somehow get back to the pits. But that was a huge shunt. Now Klaus Kohn, of course, into P3, but he will have another race to have a second chance at this. Well, not at the crashing, but at the podium part of it.
Hopefully the podium part. But yeah, that was... I'm surprised all the four wheels remained on that car then, because that was a big smash.
I think we've rarely seen a hit this violent in Blanchimont.
Yeah, that was a bit of a rarity, that's for sure. He must have hit the wall at a pretty impressive speed.
Oh, but Ronan also
spinning there.
trying to use the all-wheel drive system to spin it around. Couldn't quite make that work. Question is, Enrico Breininger, he's still quite far down the road, so not an immediate threat, but he has to watch out to not damage the car too much, because a hit like this can easily bend your suspension.
Yeah, he seemed to get out of that quite lightly, considering it was a pretty side-on hit onto the barrier. But he doesn't seem to be holding back much. But Hopefully his suspension's not too badly damaged after that one.
Mashinsky in the pits, so he was able to drive back. Can maybe use 1 or 2 laps to get back used to the car. Since we should have 2 more, or with this 2 more laps.
Yeah, Rowan Doherty seemed to lose about 10 seconds with his crash there. But he seems to be maintaining the gap to Enrico Breininger. He's not growing anymore, so he's maybe lost a little bit of speed, but he seems to be handling it okay.
You know, we had a Spa race, of course, last week here with the GT3s, which is very, very different. And
yes.
what I find interesting is we've seen some of these drivers drive in that other race in Spa, most notably, of course, Enrico Breininger and Rowan Hood. And you can tell by seeing them drive, they know the track. They know how to drive, but still this car's posing a very, very different challenge and not an easy one. So would you say if you can master a track with the Mission R, you can pretty much master it with any car?
Maybe. Or maybe you've just got to drive it very, very differently with the Mission R. And the knowledge wouldn't transfer across. But yeah, some of our kind of more seasoned drivers here still struggling to try and keep this beast on the road. Rowan using the all-wheel drive system there to drag it around the corner.
I mean, Porsche all-wheel drive systems are proven in the gravel, so. Mashinsky, of course, still in the pits, just too much damage to his car.
Yeah, that was a lot of damage. I'm surprised if he gets out before the end of the race here.
Ronan Hood losing the car, exiting La Source, just being too much on the curb. All-wheel drive is good and all, but if the tires have different grip levels, it can bite you, and this will lose him more time. Unless he does a bigger mistake again, it shouldn't be enough for Enrico Breininger, who is now probably catching up to about 5 to 6 seconds, which is roughly where he was after his mistake. But Warren can't afford to do something like this again if he wants to win race 1 here today at Spa.
Yeah, hopefully that's the end of his spinning ways. Enrico's not got a lot to lose right now. He might as well keep the pedal to the metal. He's 52 seconds ahead of third place.
Having a bit of a drift himself though, so he's also struggling. And keep in mind the next race is a bit longer than this one. So if the car is not driving well for you now because you've overdone the tires, you really have to watch out in the second race. Maybe we'll see somebody coming in just for safety managements into the pits. Who knows?
Maybe. I'm not really sure on the condition of these guys' tires right now, but they don't seem too bad. I know they're having a few moments, but Enrico Breininger drifting it around all the corners there.
You know, one very fun activity if you just wanna or need to shut off your brain a bit. If you go into the beta figure 8 track with this car, doesn't matter if it's on wheel or controller, just drift around the track. It actually is a lot more fun than it sounds. And running again with a big drift through Blanchimont. It's scary to watch, but he does come around the final turn to win race number 1. with a nice 360. I think that's a good way to celebrate. Enrico
That
Bräuninger
was a
will,
good 360.
Enrico Bräuninger will come home in second. And I also see that Maszynski is back out on track. Just in time. But Klaus Kohn will claim the podium for race number 1. Let's see who we will see back for race number 2. Qualifying, as said, is still determined by this first qualifying session. Which for Rondon Hood and Enrico Bräuninger doesn't really change that much.
Let's see if anyone can get the bonus points for having a completely clean missionar at the end of the race.
Maybe we could include that in one of the next leaks.
0 damage, no pit stops.
But yeah, for Maszynski, I think this lap is more for getting used to the car again, going into So there we are, right back with the stream. Of course, something that you don't want to happen in your car is that it just shuts off. But Maszynski is able to complete his final lap for race number 1, and we will move into race number 2 in just a moment's time. So yeah, I mean, the first one, very drawn out grid. I think the second one should be a bit closer. People getting used to the car now, especially to the normal race mode this car has.
Yeah, it was a bit of a sighting race, if you, I suppose, if you can put it that way. People getting used to the car a bit more, and like you said, the race mode after coming out of quali mode. So it's a very different beast.
Rondon Hood in those double-sided races has taken the win quite often. So let's see if we can do it again. We go racing for the second time for today, for the last time this week on this Twitch channel. And immediately down the inside of Enrico Bräuninger, I think that might be Klaus Kühn. Oh, and there's contact and sending... That is interesting. No, that's Dennis Kurzer, my apologies. Then sending Dennis Kurzer into the classic pit lane. That is
taking a tour down the endurance pits.
And he's actually keeping it to the pit exit line, which is nice. But out of all the things that could have happened, I didn't have that on my bingo card. Enrico Bräuninger and Dennis Kurzer colliding with each other. And I think we've never seen a car driving through the endurance pits.
No, not in RENNSPORT, that's for sure. I think that might be a RENNSPORT first.
Quick thinking by Dennis Kurzer, though.
Yeah. Luckily, you didn't have to stick to the pit speed limit.
Maszynski, a few issues there in Lecom. But Rondon Hood leading away once again.
Yeah, he's got a pretty impressive lead for this early in the race, to be honest. And seen Enrico Bräuninger already getting a little bit sideways around some of the corners. Probably not wise for his tyres at this early on.
One of the damage plays into that he collected. It looked like he did the same thing as Rowan did in the race before on the last lap. Where Rowan just went a bit too right onto the curb and lost the car. If Enrico did the same thing, just had the car of Dennis Kurzer there to kind of capture his fall.
Yeah.
but at least all cars still able to continue.
And we definitely saw in the last race things didn't always go to plan, so we'll see what happens here. Enrico Breininger already closing the gap up a little bit there, so I think Rowan might have had a bit of a moment in a couple of corners.
Yeah, maybe he's taking a bit easier. As you said, Enrico was sideways quite a lot, which in the short run may be a bit faster with that all-wheel drive system. On the other hand, really doesn't help your tires, making the car even more understeery. But there are some key points to this track, one of them being Eau Rouge, one being also the likes of Pouhon and Stavelot. When you hit those neatly, then you can gain a lot of time even without stressing your tires. But on board with Rowan den Hood.
I've said before when we've talked about the Mission R that one of the things I really struggle with driving it is the fact that it doesn't have gears, and I never know how fast to go into corners. So I'm impressed with the way these guys are adapting to that and managing to get around Spa in a almost clean fashion most of the time.
Including newly found racing lines. This one in her just catches the curbs a bit wrong here, but yeah, I mean, most people will drive racing cars by gears. So, you know, in Stavelot you drive through 4th gear, in a GT3 and all that kind of stuff. In the Mission R you really don't have that, so you have to either go by sound with the engine RPM, or you go by feel, which is kind of tricky.
Yeah, I'm too old to figure out. Oh,
somehow doesn't hit the wall.
he's incredibly lucky today. That was another impressive save.
He's having a lot of incredible near misses, but let's hope his luck doesn't run out. Yesterday it was Inches deciding his race early, today as well, in some way, just the other way around. Again, sideways, up a Rouge.
Not something you really want to be doing. It's not good for your trousers.
Squad's also still carrying on. See some damage to the front left, of course, due to that contact with Enrico Breininger. Doesn't seem to hinder him too much, though.
No, he seems to be handling that pretty well.
Oh, but Rowan den Hood is off in Bruxelles. With some damage to the rear right, missing a bit of his diffuser as well.
See if that affects his pace as the lap carries on. That's put Enrico Breininger back 5 seconds from him. It's really closed that gap up between those two.
Oh, but Enrico Breininger also with issues through Pouhon loses the car. Oh, and also heavy hit into the wall. And I think that is also some damage to the left rear suspension. And indeed
you would think so. He's obviously not got the Rowan look when it comes to avoiding barriers there.
Could actually help Dennis Kutzer get into P2 if he can keep his car clean, because I don't think Enrico Breininger will be able to continue with the damage.
Seems to be okay. I won't say great right now.
Depends on how much he likes crabbing.
Yeah.
Oh, but again, loose on the curb and another big hit into the wall.
Yeah, that was a pretty big one. I think he's going to have to go in and get that fixed now, which is going to be a lengthy pit stop.
Dennis Kurzer goes through. And I think Marzinski should also be able to capitalize on that.
Yeah, he's a drop back a fair bit, but with the length of the pit stop that I think Enrico Breininger will be having here, Marzinski should be able to get past, which will put him in the last podium position.
And a good notion from Chad as well. Imagine finishing this race, because yes, it's a big challenge to finish the race in the first place. And we've seen that in the last race with the huge off Marzinski had. It'll be interesting to look back at it. But yeah, I mean, some races are more about the racing, some are more about survival. Usually you find those on the Nordschleife, but today we see it in a slightly different part of the Ardennes. As Ronin Hood drifting through Puhon again and somehow keeps it again out of the wall.
He did take a lot of curb on the entry there. I was thinking that was pretty brave in this car.
One thing we, of course, usually talk about a bit in those RENNSPORT community events is the next community event. As some of you might know, every 2 weeks there is a RENNSPORT community event. And the next one is a bit special. The next one will not only be a long race again, which we didn't have in some time, so a proper endurance race, but also it will have a slightly different way of qualifying for this. Ronin Hood is losing it out of Blanchimont and does a nice 360 with it. Gotta be said. And Enrico Breuninger is coming out
Practicing
of the
those
pits.
360s.
Indeed, he is. But yeah, coming back to the event next week, it will have a very, very different way of qualifying for it, at least for the top split. Because we want to try out some things, we want to test some methods for the future, let's say. And to put it simply, we have an endurance race with hypercars and GT3s at Daytona. And qualifying through it or for the top split will be handled via hot lap servers. So you have 1.5 weeks to set a lap time on any of the hot lap servers, which spawn every half an hour in the schedule from Monday on. So from tomorrow on. And you can either qualify by being the outright fastest or by having a high rating. So if you don't really have the pace to qualify, for example, if you want to race in the GT3 class as one of the top 7 drivers, you can instead grind your rating up and be one of the 7 highest rated drivers, which I think is an interesting concept. So you will not only have the fastest guys, but also the most experienced within RENNSPORT, I'd say. Could mix the grid up.
Experience definitely counts on the endurance races, and I know some people don't have the immediate single lap pace of other drivers. They're not qualifying wizards, but that doesn't mean they're slow.
I mean, the easiest examples of that are within our leagues. If you look at, for example, just Ronin Hood and Dominic Ladler, two vastly different drivers. Of course, Dominic Ladler is quick, but usually you would see that Ronin Hood has more pace, but Dominic Ladler just has that sheer consistency, almost crushing consistency, that led to him having multiple titles. So, yeah, going into that race, I think it will be very interesting to see how the system works out and to get to know whether it's good for future use. Don't think many games did it like this.
No, I don't think so. I think it's a new format on me, that's for sure. But yeah, I think it's a good idea, and we'll see what happens out of it. I think it could lead to some good results.
More
So
info will...
if you
Yeah, go on.
no, carry on.
Just, of course, interrupting my good colleague here. But more info on that, or more detailed info, will follow on our socials tomorrow. That is the plan. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the event itself. Daytona always delivered. We had the Daytona 2.4 hours earlier this year in January.
Yeah, and it'd be good to have some multi-class going on in Daytona. Hopefully get a few more takers for the hypercars than we generally would. There is sometimes a bit of an underprescribed car class, but Daytona hypercars and GT3 cars, it's a classic combination.
Yeah, of course, in our case, the classes will have set limits, 10 hypercars and 14 GT3s. And I think it will be very interesting with the dynamic it will bring with it. So, yeah. Think it might be one of the most evenly spread events we had, if everything plays out. And I'm looking forward to hosting it. And of course, we will also have something next week. I'm not going to say what it will be, but next week we won't only have the RENNSPORT Community League, which is also the finale of Season 6, community voted for Hockenheim. But on Sunday, we will bring back an event that was fairly popular a couple of months ago. And I would keep an eye on for our socials to find out what it is.
Oh, you're dropping all the teasers today, Lino.
I am. I absolutely am. And I'm not ashamed. Maschinsky's in the pits, allowing Enrico Bräuninger to take back third.
He's got a long, long way to catch up to Dennis Kurtzer, though. That pit stop was almost like an entire epoch of man. It was so long. But it does seem to have calmed Enrico Bräuninger down a bit. He seems to be driving really smoothly now. I've just cursed him. I understand that.
He only has 10 minutes to go. What can possibly go wrong? It's going to be what I find interesting about this race, of course, it's not the most action-packed, not the most real-to-real racing, more about survival, but I think we had one of the most violent crashes, and even yesterday we had a pretty violent one, but today's one with Maschinsky absolutely losing it in Blanchimont, that was a pretty heavy hit. And then we had Dennis Kurtzer being sent down the pit lane in a very interesting, and I don't even know how to say it, a very precise body check from Enrico Bräuninger.
It was one of those things that you couldn't have made it happen if you tried, but which I think Enrico Bräuninger is pretty good at those on Spa, isn't he?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, last week he, I think, found out that Blanchimont may as well be his favorite turn because he did, 3 overtaking moves there? Swan again puts on a show at Stavelo, but yeah, he didn't really go for the simple normal moves. He always decided to let's go side by side into Blanchimont, past Dennis Kurtzer, past Mark Hewitt, and I think past Mark Hewitt again. So yeah, he really likes that turn as it seems.
Rowan's battered mission R. Brain cell work. Carrying on there, he seems to have chilled out a little bit and found his kind of groove a little bit more with the car. Hasn't had too many scary moments recently.
Enrico Bräuninger seemed to have a bit of a moment in Las Suas, just pointed a bit into the wrong direction, but apart from some scratches on the rear right, I don't really see much damage to his car. go on board with Enrico Breuninger for a bit.
The one downside of the electric cars is you can't even say listen to that engine for a while because it's just whining.
Of course, the sound is just very different to what people are used to.
I can't say it's going to replace a thumping V8 just yet. I'm sure some people will find some beauty in the tone of an electric car, but yeah, I think it'll take a while longer for it to grow on me.
But I think what you can't deny, what everybody loves, is the hypercar bump start.
That is true.
That is absolutely gorgeous to listen to. Does it make sense to say gorgeous in listening? Whatever.
Yeah. Totally.
Just that switch from those electric engines and then those, especially in the Cadillac and the BMW, the V8 firing up. I think you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, the V8s do sound fantastic when they get bump started in the hypercars. Although perhaps my patriotism showing a little bit, but the Aston Martin Valkyrie sounds pretty cool. I know it doesn't do the electric bump start thing, but
I mean, I gotta admit, I really like the Klickenhaus. I know people hate it for some reason, but I really like that. Might not agree with everything said by a certain Mr. Glickenhaus, but the cars coming from the Nordschleife, I always was a pretty big fan with the SCGs. But Ronan Hood leading away with 5 minutes left on the clock. Potentially 3 laps, including this one.
It's a brilliant result for Dennis Kurtzer if he can carry on holding on to second place here.
Catching up to Marczynski, who's just having had a few issues in Eau Rouge.
Staying well out the way there and letting the faster car through.
If you are looking for some action yourself this evening, I can suggest checking out the Twitch channel of Der Kaya, who is currently having his own series here on RENNSPORT. Also with the race at Spa, GT3s and hypercars, but also some GT4 and M2 action on Hockenheim and Road Atlanta. He's currently streaming, so if you want to find some races, as Enrico Breuninger is not losing it again out of Blanchimont, but keeps it out of the wall this time.
What? Maybe the electric engines in these Mission R's are somehow repelling the metal barriers. They seem remarkably good at avoiding them.
Indeed it is, and I think just that's Ronan Hood going through and Enrico Breuninger waiting for him. But yeah, the next race in the Kaya series is at Fuji with GT3s and hypercars in about half an hour. So we will, of course, send you to him after the stream has concluded.
Hypercars at Fuji are always a good time, I think, as long as you can brake without insanely flat spotting your tires. I think hypercars are pretty fun at Fuji and GT3s, to be honest. It's not a track I've been overly familiar with before RENNSPORT, but I've learned to love it.
Yeah, I mean, those long turns, 100R, the infield section before Panasonic, can really use the downforce from the hypercars, which is pretty insane. And the track being very wide makes it very suitable for multi-class as well.
And with the sheer length of the straight, you can really see the pace difference between the hypercars and the GT3s come into effect.
But as it seems, we will have one more lap after this one. And if I can recall back to we did this combination Mission R on a track with this kind of format 3 times by now, including this event. The first one I think was at Jeddah, then we went to Daytona, and of course this time we are here at Spa. And I think Ron and Hood already did, as he now does a spin again, coming towards Stavelo. Not the first time we've seen that. We'll just look up the results from the last community events where we had this.
Yeah, I can't remember them off the top of my head. I seem to remember the Daytona race was really good. The Jeddah one was a bit of a wall fest, but the Daytona race was nice. Maybe a bit easier to control this beast with the banking and the slightly more predictable infield section.
Yeah, in Jeddah it was Ali Zaya winning both races, with Ron and Hood 3rd and 2nd. Actually, Enrico Bräuniger being 4th and 2nd in those races. Just trying to find the last one. Which proves to be a bit tricky. Last year we also did one at Hockenheim, with a certain Joachim Thunder and Dennis Kurzer winning the races. That name rings a bell, just saying it like that.
Rowan just bouncing a little around the corners there. Back end just seems to kind of like hop and skip a little bit as it goes round. Not great for the tyres, but you don't have to look after them for much longer.
Really struggle to find the event I'm looking for.
The events list can sometimes be a bit confusing.
Yeah, it was won by Adrian Lunia, who of course really liked this car. Unfortunately, he's not as active at the moment in the community. Enrico Bräuniger also bringing home 2 podium finishes in that race. It was on the 28th of September last year.
Wow, that was a while ago.
And indeed was. But yeah, after all these winners, Ron and Hood will become one of them in the Mission R. Again, winning both races, pretty much start to finish. So congratulations.
He tried to link his drifting turns there, but didn't quite make it work.
Not quite, but Enrico Bräuniger comes home 2nd on track, 3rd in the positions. So it's another 2 podium finishes for him. But Dennis Kurzer coming home a strong 2nd in this race. Mashinsky also has finished.
It's a good result for Dennis Kurzer here, coming in 2nd. He definitely kept it on the consistency basis there, which it's as good a reason to get 2nd as any.
Does his pit stop count as a valid one? That's the question. Yeah, however, I think there's not much else from us to say, unless you have something.
No, not really. Thanks for everyone for showing up and watching. I know it wasn't perhaps the most exciting broadcast for you guys to watch, but thank you for sticking with us and taking part.
Indeed. as we've said, have an eye on the socials next week. We have 2 major announcements for events coming up. And of course, next week we will start off on Saturday with the RCL finale, where we have the title fight between Dominic Ladler and Ruan Den Hood. Until then, have a great time. Maybe drive some races with Kaya. And yeah, I'd say enjoy the little sneak peek for the event we've been talking about. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.